Missing You But You Were Searching All Along by Beckita, VivienneBlue. Chapter 1. You saved the world, but somehow mine ended. 5 months, 1 week and 2 days ago. Royal Hospital, Wakanda. We got him here just in time. We still aren't out of the woods, but we are more hopeful than we were initially, Dr. Strange explained to Pepper. She collapsed into a chair, rubbing her eyes. The doctors had been working steadily on Tony since they had arrived in Wakanda the previous evening. Her thoughts had been nothing but anxious as she had waited for news, some bit of hope that her husband was not gone. Finally, in the early morning hours, as the sun peeked over the horizon, here it was. "Thank you, Stephen," she murmured. Rhodey reached down and squeezed her shoulder. "I'll go update everyone else," he said gently. "Send Peter back here when you do," Pepper called after him as he left the private waiting area. "He should be back here with us." She should have thought of that before now, but she had been having trouble formulating any thought beside Tony. Rhodey met her gaze and nodded before heading to the bigger waiting area down the hall where a majority of the Avengers waited. "They're hopeful," he said as he walked in the room. There were obvious sighs of relief from those gathered. "That's good to hear," Steve said, rubbing his jaw. Rhodey glanced around the room, his eyes narrowing. "Where's the kid?" he asked. "The kid?" Steve questioned, straightening. "Yeah, the kid. Peter. Spider-Man," Rhodey repeated. "Oh, Queens?" Steve nodded. "He's not here. Sam gave him a ride to the city. He said he dropped him off." "What?" Rhodey's mouth dropped open. "Did he at least make sure he got to his aunt?" "His aunt?" Steve's brow furrowed. "I don't think so. Queens had Sam drop him off on a corner, said he could get home from there." Rhodey tried to squelch the wave of panic that hit as he tried to formulate his next words. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "Sam dropped a 15-year-old off, alone in the middle of the city, without making sure he made it safely to his guardian." There were murmurs from the other Avengers at that. Steve looked sick, saying, 15? Queens is only 15? The Colonel swallowed, eyeing the super soldier. "Call Sam and find out exactly where he left him. As soon as you have that information, send it to me." Steve nodded, pulling out his phone as Rhodey quickly exited the room, sprinting back to where Pepper waited. He burst into the room. "James!" Pepper cried, jumping to her feet in confusion. "We lost Peter," he blurted. Pepper felt her blood run cold as she repeated in a low tone. "We lost Peter? What exactly do you mean that we lost Peter?" "He never made it here. The Falcon dropped him off in the middle of the city," he explained. Pepper sank into the chair again, the tears she had successfully been holding back all day rising to the surface. "He is going to kill me. Actually kill me. I had one job, keep his kid safe, and I can't even do that. I was so worried about him I forgot to take care of Peter." Hey. Her friend knelt down in front of her, taking a hold of her hands and holding them gently. "He won't kill you. He'll understand. But right now, let's work on finding him. Let's work on making sure he is safe." Pepper nodded, pulling one hand free and swiping at her watery eyes. "I'd call Happy and get him to start looking, but he's watching Morgan." "Let me call my mom. You know she always loves grandbaby time. She can go to your place and stay with Morgan. That will free Happy up to look. I'll see if any of my contacts can keep an eye out for the kid. We'll find him, Pep, I promise. We'll have him here before Tony wakes up and realises we lost him. And then, when he fusses at you, we'll shove the spiderling in his arms and he won't be mad at you anymore." He squeezed her hand and stood. The woman gave him a small smile and forced a laugh. It wasn't the greatest, but it was improvement. At that moment there was a knock on the door. A very apologetic-looking Captain America stood on the other side. I'm so sorry, he said to Pepper. We didn't realise he really was just a kid. We should have kept a better eye on him. Pepper offered him a small smile, but didn't trust herself to speak. Steve turned to Rhodey. Sam sent the address to where he dropped him. He said he'd drive back over to the area and look around. I have some things I need to wrap up here, but as soon as I can, I'll head back and see how I can help. Thanks, Steve, Rhodey said. He closed the door and turned back to Pepper. Call your mom, the CEO said, trying to rein in her emotions. I'll call Happy and let him know to start looking. He might be able to track Peter's suits. Rhodey nodded and moved to leave the room. He paused for a second and said, Pep, after you call Happy, do me a favour and go sit with Tones for a bit. I think you could both use it. The woman nodded and the two parted ways. After getting in touch with Happy and updating him on the situation, she moved into Tony's room. She cringed at the sight of her strong, vibrant husband hooked up to so many machines. But he was alive, she reminded herself. At least for right now, he was alive. She dropped into the chair by his bed and reached out to stroke his only remaining hand. She wished she could cling to it, bring it to her lips, her face, something where she could feel his touch, even for a moment. But he was connected to so many machines, there were so many tubes and wires connected to him. This was what she had to settle for at the moment. Tony, she whispered, her tears flowing again. Honey, I messed up so bad, and you're going to hate me. After everything that you went through to get him back, I lost your kid again. She folded her arms on the edge of his bed, resting her head as close to him as she dared, listening to the steady beep of the machines. Please wake up, she breathed. Please, Tony, I know I told you to rest, but I need you to stop resting and get better so you can help me. I can't do this without you. The tears flowed down her cheeks, soaking her arms and his sheets, but she didn't move, didn't try to stem the flow. She must have fallen asleep, because the next thing she knew, a hand was gently shaking her shoulder. Her eyes were scratchy and dry from crying, and her neck and back were screaming at her for sleeping, slumped over her husband's bed. She sat up, blinking, as Rhodey slowly came into focus. Pep, he said gently, we have news. 5 months, 1 week and 3 days ago, Avengers Compound, Hudson River Valley, New York. The relief at watching Thanos and his army dust away was squelched as soon as he realised the reason. No! He cried, swinging over to where War Machine was bent over Iron Man's still figure. He dropped to the ground, scrambling to his feet and over to his mentor's side. No, no, no! He couldn't lose another father figure, another parent. His tears flowed freely as he fell to his knees in front of the man. Mr. Stark, he whispered. You did it, Mr. Stark. We won. He felt a hand on his shoulders, finally realising that Pepper was standing behind him, and let her move him. I'm sorry, Tony, he sobbed, tears clouding his vision as Pepper squeezed him and then shifted him into Rhodey's arms. He didn't register any of the words she was saying, that Friday was replying. Everything muddled together as Pepper called for Dr. Strange, as Rhodey nudged Peter back towards Captain America before rushing to Mr. Stark's side. The noise and chaos was overwhelming to the boy's already heightened senses. He found himself instinctually moving further back in the crowd, trying to put as much distance between the clamour and himself. He fell to the ground, wrapping his arms around his head, trying to calm his senses, his thoughts, his grief. Following the events of Homecoming and Vulture, Peter had struggled quite a bit with panic attacks. Tony had helped him through many of them, teaching him grounding techniques and deep breathing, any tool that would be useful. Right now, he just wanted Mr. Stark. He just wanted his mentor's arms around him, like they had been when earlier in the day. He couldn't lose Mr. Stark. He couldn't lose another parent. He wasn't sure how long he'd been curled up on the ground when he felt someone's hand resting on his head. Hey, Queens, a voice was calling him. Peter focused on it, on the pressure against his body, slowly uncurling and fixing his gaze on Sam Wilson, who knelt beside him looking concerned. Hey, Queens, they got Iron Man to Wakanda. They're taking the injured there as well. Do you have anything that needs to be treated? Peter shook his head and then used the sleeve of his suit to roughly wipe away the tears that remained on his cheeks. Can I take you anywhere? Sam asked. Peter thought about asking for Pepper or Rhodey, but he also knew they were concerned about Tony and didn't need to worry about him as well. He tried to contact them later to get an update about how Mr. Stark was doing, and suddenly he just wanted May. He wanted his one live, whole, healthy parent. Can you get me to Queens? He asked softly. Sam nodded, offering an arm to pull him to his feet. Kappa's in Wakanda, the man explained as they made their way across the battlefield and remains of the compound. But he gave me the keys to his car so I could use it. It's in one of the areas that somehow remained relatively unscathed. Peter nodded, not really feeling up to conversing. Sam seemed to note that Spider-Man wasn't in a talkative mood and drove in silence until they reached Queens. The streets of the city were quite possibly even more chaotic than the compound had been. You can drop me off here, Peter managed to say. You sure? Sam asked sceptically. Peter pulled on his mask and nodded. Sam pulled over close to an alley and away from the crowds to give the vigilante a chance to slip out unnoticed. Thanks for the ride, the teen said as he exited the car. Bye, Queens, Sam answered. He watched as Spider-Man webbed his way to the roof of a nearby building before he pulled back into traffic. Peter had recognised the area as being near his apartment building. He figured this would be an easy enough place to begin looking for May. He swung to the roof of his old building and stripped out of both the Iron Spider and his regular suit. He stuffed both of them in a small alcove behind some pipes and mechanicals, and then used the emergency exit to slip inside the building. He made his way down to his old apartment and knocked on the door. A young woman he didn't recognise answered. I'm sorry to bother you, he stammered at her piercing gaze. But is May Parker here? The woman's gaze softened. Did you just return, honey? Peter nodded. I'm so sorry, she continued. The previous occupants were dusted. My family has lived here for just under 5 years now. May had dusted too. That would make finding her more difficult. Peter forced out a thanks and made his way out of the building, racking his brain for how he could find his aunt. He briefly considered retrieving his suit and having Karen contact Friday for help, but immediately rejected it. Who knew how Mr. Stark was doing, and he couldn't distract them right now. He'd get his suit and check in with them as soon as he found May. 5 months, 1 week and 2 days ago. Royal Hospital, Wakanda. News? Pepper repeated, sitting up straighter and turning to face Rhodey. Happy was able to trace both of Peter's suits to the rooftop of his old building in Queens. He held up his hand when he saw the glint of excitement in Pepper's eyes, continuing. Sam was able to locate the suits stuffed in an alcove on the roof. Unfortunately, there's no sign of Peter there. We left the suits there for the time being, with a few drones scouting the location in case Peter returns. That sounds like a good idea for the time being, Pepper said, standing and stretching. The worst part of getting older was how stiff she felt after sitting for too long. She asked, Did Sam check to see if he was in their old apartment or had been there? May blipped too, but maybe they let him stay? Rhodey shook his head. Sam checked. The woman there said a boy had stopped by but had left when he found out the person he was looking for wasn't there. Why didn't he just call us? Pepper muttered. Rhodey opened his mouth to answer, but the woman rolled her eyes and added, I know it's because he thinks we need to focus on Tony and not him, so he doesn't want to bother us. The kid is even more self-sacrificing than Tony, and it drives me insane. They really are 2 peas in a pod, aren't they? Rhodey couldn't help the fond grin at the thought of the pair. Did your mom make it to Morgan okay? The mother asked softly, changing the subject. Her friend nodded. She said she is retired and being with her grandbaby beats bingo. She'll stay as long as needed. Pepper looked relieved. Thanks for calling her, James. I'll go call her and talk to Morgan. Stay with Tony? After chatting with her surrogate mother-in-law and daughter for a bit, the CEO found herself wandering the hospital halls. She hadn't left the private waiting room since she arrived, other than to sit by Tony's side, and she was feeling like if she went back in there, she wouldn't be able to breathe. Pepper. A hesitant voice called from behind her, and she turned to see Steve Rogers. Hi, Steve, she said softly. Is Tony... Still the same. Do you want some food? When was the last time you ate anything? He questioned, giving her a scrutinising look. I probably should, she admitted. She followed Steve through the building to the cafeteria. After they were seated with food before them, Steve finally spoke. I've wrapped up most of what I need to go back to New York, he explained. Bucky's going with me. I know that things weren't great between Tony and I, but are you okay with us helping look for Peter? As many people who can help the better. Thank you, Steve, she murmured. Bruce and Scott will be working on rebuilding the machine to return the stones, so until that is ready, I can help. I appreciate that, Steve. Really, I do. And thank you for the company and insisting I eat, she replied. She wasn't used to feeling like this, lost and inept. She was used to being composed, having it together, the epitome of control. But right now, Steve was giving her the space she needed to fall apart, and that seemed especially invaluable. She finished her food and stood. I should get back to Tony, but thank you, Steve. I mean it. She didn't know if Tony would survive. She didn't know if they would find Peter, but she knew she had people who had her family's back. 5 months, 1 week, and 3 days ago. Queens, New York City. My aunt, May Parker, used to work here 5 years ago, Peter told the receptionist at the hospital where his aunt had been a nurse for years. Please, just tell me if she showed up to try to help. She's my only family. The receptionist typed and checked something on her computer before shaking her head sadly. I'm so sorry, but we don't have any record of her here. We've had several people who reappeared come in, so we've been trying to make a record of anyone who comes to help out. It doesn't look like she's been here at all. Do you want to leave a message for her in case she does come in later? Just tell her that Peter came in. I'll track her down. Thanks. The teen gave her a tight smile and turned to leave. Try some of the shelters and hospitals, the woman called after him. He turned back around. Thanks. With that, he left and slipped back onto the busy street. Too tired to think, he let the crowd carry him further into Queens. This morning he had been on his way to the MOMA. This morning he had helped Mr. Stark try to save a wizard and fight an alien and went to space. This morning he'd become an Avenger, and met the Guardians, and fought Thanos, and dusted, and fought Thanos again, and he was tired. So tired. He debated again about giving up, going back to get his suits and contacting Friday, but he also thought of Mr. Stark's still form, how worried Mrs. Stark had been. He couldn't bother them when they clearly had much more important, more pressing things on their mind. He wearily looked up and realised he was near a shelter. He slipped inside and asked the woman there about his aunt. She hadn't heard of her, so he left feeling very dejected and headed on to the next place. I'm looking for May Parker, he told the man working at the front desk at the next shelter he saw. The man ran a finger through an open book in front of him. I'm sorry, kid, but don't have anyone here by that name. Oh, he said, his shoulders slumping forward. Thanks anyway. Do you want some food? The man asked, holding up a paper bag. It isn't much, just an apple, sandwich, chips, and a bottle of water. But you look like you could use a pick-me-up. We have them here to hand out to people. Peter reached out and took the bag, murmuring his thanks as he left the building. There was a park across the street with a few buildings, so Peter moved over there. He found a bench and sat. The bagged meal was nowhere near enough for what he needed, but he hadn't eaten since before he left for MOMA. He tried not to devour the meal too quickly. As he ate, he tried to formulate a plan. Getting his suit and calling Friday just didn't feel like an option. He wasn't sure he could bear it if he heard that Mr. Stark had died. And if he was still alive, Pepper needed to be able to focus on him, not some random teen following them around like a lost puppy. By this point, the sun was beginning to set, but it looked like the city that never sleeps was going to be even more awake than usual. He contemplated tracking down Ned or even MJ, but his need to find his aunt pulled him stronger. He threw trash away in the bin and moved towards the next hospital on his mental list. It was a little after 5 in the morning, visiting the 4th hospital, that he finally located May. "If you wait here, I'll have a doctor come speak with you," the nurse at the desk told him sympathetically. Dread filled Peter at those words. His aunt wasn't here working. She was here as a patient. The doctor's words came in flashes. "We're so sorry. Hit by a car as she reappeared. Nothing we can do. Made her comfortable." Peter numbly followed the doctor to the ICU room, where his aunt lay connected to machines monitoring her declining vitals. "Aunt May," he whispered, taking her hand. "I'm here. I made it back. I'm here." He fell asleep, slumped onto the bed, clinging to her hand until a nurse came into the room to adjust her pain medication a few hours later. "Sorry to wake you up," she said apologetically. Peter merely shrugged, leaning back in his chair, not releasing his hold on his aunt's hand. "How is she?" he finally managed to ask. The nurse gave him a sympathetic look. "I'm so sorry, sweetie, but the doctor thinks she only has hours at best. We're just making her comfortable at this point. Is there anyone we can call for you?" Peter's eyes welled with tears. Who was there to call? He almost mentioned the Starks when he realised he didn't know Pepper's number. Her number was in his phone, that he left on the bus in his backpack 5 years ago. Maybe, just maybe, he could try Stark Industries? See if they could contact Pepper? "Maybe," he finally managed. "Can I use the phone? I know normally you'd have to pay, but—" "Of course, honey," she answered kindly. "The hospital is waiving the fees for calls for the time being. Feel free to call whoever you might need to call. I'll be back to check in on you both in a bit." Peter took a deep breath and blurted before she left. "Is there some place I can look up a phone number?" The nurse paused for a moment and then handed Peter her phone. "Go ahead and look it up. I'll wait." Peter thanked her and quickly searched for the number. After he had it, he handed it back, thanking her again. After she left him alone with May, he attempted to call SI's public number. "Stark Industries, how may I help you?" a perky voice answered. Hi, my name is Peter Parker," he said hesitantly. "Okay, Peter, how can I help you?" "I'm sorry, I really need to talk to Pepper. Can you—" "You want to talk to Pepper Potts Stark?" the woman asked, disbelief dripping from her tone. Potts Stark? The realisation that his mentor had gotten married while he was gone slammed him in the gut. He should have been there. He forced himself to continue. "Please, it's really important. She knows me." "If you knew her, she would have your number." With that, the woman hung up the phone. Peter hung up, feeling absolutely dejected and helpless. He angrily swiped tears away from his face. He thought once more about going back to retrieve the suits, but with Aunt May only having hours, he was afraid to leave her. He thought about attempting to email her, but he knew from experience that unfamiliar emails went to spam, and neither Tony or Pepper would ever see them, and without his phone, he had no clue what any of his passwords were. If he tried to log in, more than likely he'd lock himself out of his accounts. If he tried to open a new account, there was no way that he would ever get through to Pepper. His only hope would to be either get back to his suits or to try SI later and hope he got someone who would listen. He tried again that afternoon, and later in the evening, just before business hours ended. Each time it was the same result: disbelief, scoffing, ignoring him. Peter curled up on the chair next to May's bed. She had been unconscious this entire time, hadn't even woken up so he could say goodbye. He tried to remember their last words to each other, but it had been such a normal day. He was fairly certain he had tossed out a "goodbye" and "I love you" before he'd raced out the door in a bid not to be late to school. What had she said to him? Weren't you supposed to remember someone's last words? In the early morning hours, the steady beep of the monitor changed to one long beep. The hiss of the machines helping her breathe stopped. Her chest, which had been rising and falling, stilled forever. And in that moment, Peter felt utterly alone. The hospital gave him some time to be alone in grief, but eventually the nurse returned with a stern-looking woman in a suit. "Peter," the nurse said gently, "we need you to go with the social worker." And reluctantly, after squeezing his aunt's hand one last time and planting one final kiss on her cheek, Peter followed the social worker out of the room. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this chapter. Have a lovely day.